Alright everyone, it's time for Witch Hunt 2.0 here. I'm liking how J.K. Rowling is now victimized by cancel culture, because I can remember like 20 years ago when the Harry Potter thing was really big, when I was, a tween basically. I can remember like all the fundamentalist Christians were trying to cancel J.K. Rowling with the idea that Harry Potter she's a far leftist and she's trying to get him to worship Satan, and they were like, well, our kids are going to do witchcraft because of Harry Potter. We need to ban it in schools. We need to ban it in the public libraries. We need to burn this book. And they would gyrate around speaking in tongues and stupid, goofy shit like that. And it was funny because then people who are younger were like, well, no, that's not actually happening. What the fuck are you talking about? It's just a good book. Hey, at least kids are reading. A lot of kids, they never picked up a book before, probably. Fucking illiterate, because the educational system has failed. Finally, there was something that they enjoyed reading. It was really viral, and get together in reading parties and stuff, and it's kind of cool and a good thing. But now those same, core millennials, people in my age range, are ourselves trying to cancel J.K. Rowling. Like, I'm not, because I think that this is just hilarious nonsense purity spiraling at this point. But these same people, the more left youth, which is most of the millennials still, not really youth anymore at this point. The youngest millennials are still kind of in the youthful demographic, but not really. Like they're in their mid-20s or something. That's not that old. But now they're trying to cancel her because the problem is this. J.K. Rowling is a feminist. I mean, she's far leftist. She's pro-censorship. She's, I think, Labour Lib Dem over in the UK. She's an extreme leftist. She believes in socialism, basically. And she's a third-wave feminist. So it's sort of the women strong, hear me roar, too big to ignore thing. The problem is that at this point, if you're a third-wave feminist, because it takes a hard-line approach to the definition of what womanness is, it inevitably runs up against something that's completely exclusionary to it, which is the transgendered movement. If you believe that gender is malleable, that you can basically change gender, number one, and if you believe that it is non-dichotomous, that is, that it comes in a rainbow variety of flavors, number two, it's kind of hard to justify extreme feminism, because extreme feminism posits that womanness, which is a core identity, femaleness, lack of a Y chromosome essentially, is sort of like an oppressed sisterhood of Amazons that need to take back their crown from the evil males. That's basically the gist of third wave feminism. The problem is that if you don't believe in femaleness, you can't do that. So the feminist advocacy groups and grifters are afraid of the transgendered people. The transgendered people, meanwhile, because of the dichotomous approach of third wave feminist politicking, are afraid of the feminists. The two groups are never going to be able to truly be intersectional. They're never going to actually be able to mesh. This is a core group within feminism and a core group within the transgendered movement, so-called, that clash, and they always will clash. J.K. Rowling, therefore, is being canceled. People are like, go boycott Harry Potter. Oh, she's just... I've seen people say, well, J.K. Rowling's just a woman who wrote a good book years ago. It's like the funniest fucking shit ever. She's like, what is she? Like the third or fourth most rich woman in the fucking world? And one of the most notable? I realize that post-Harry Potter, her other literary endeavors have not done so well. It's funny how a person can go from selling like fucking 100 million copies of a book to selling a few thousand. It really is interesting. It's because of corporate branding and ad exposure, really. But I'm liking it, and it's exactly the same as Noam Chomsky, because Noam Chomsky, with a very few exceptions, is just a generic liberal. He's a leftist. And he's got weird views, an intelligent individual, but he's got views there that I strongly disagree with. And he's being canceled too. They're calling him, I think, a sexist. They've signed on to a letter. And the gist of the letter is, well, cancel culture's fine. It's okay to silence people's voices, just not ours. We're not your enemy. We're progressive, we're hip. Noam Chomsky's like 90 years old. J.K. Rowling, her biggest successes happened 15 years ago. So they're not realizing how the left works. Here's the problem. Like I've said, the left always overstretches. It's like the dichotomous opposite of the conservative movements of the world, which never go far enough. If you hand them a mandate, they won't do jack shit. They'll take a mountain and render it into a molehill and be completely underwhelming, which is why they tend to lose over longer periods of time on social issues if there's any real fervor on the left for them. This is something that sometimes moves in reverse, but this is a tendency. The left, meanwhile, always goes too fast, too far, and hangs itself. They're currently doing that. The turf versus intersectionality thing to the average unbiased observer, looks like a bunch of morons screaming and throwing their shit at each other. They are morons. These people are purity spiraling. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's gone well beyond the bounds of actual academia at this point, and it's become basically a Tumblr argument. J.K. Rowling, though, is caught up in the middle of it because a lot of the Gen Zers and millennials that are core fans of her fucking work, basically her core fan base, completely disagrees with her. Everyone else is sort of just sitting there shaking their heads, but I mean, at this point, the average person in their 30s at this point isn't going to bother going to see the new Harry Potter movie or something like that. Harry Potter in 3D. You get to see a sex scene with Harry Potter. It's just not going to happen. It's really funny to watch, though. It's interesting how people who have been, champions marginally of cancel culture are themselves getting canceled. And think about it this way. J.K. Rowling getting canceled is even funnier because she's bent over backwards for these people. And I think that when she's in private, she must be shaking her head at some of the weird shit she sees on Twitter. She literally said, oh, well, no, I never said Hermione Granger was white, because people wanted a black Hermione Granger for some Hollywood production. There wasn't it a play or something. They had a black girl playing Hermione Granger, and they were asking J.K. Rowling, they're like, well, Hermione's white, right? And she's like, well, I never said what race she was. Now, of course, it's not actually true. If you look, I think it was in the second book, her race is alluded to, and she's white, quite clearly. When you're talking, however, I will say one thing. When you're talking about fictional characters, like people hated it when, like, I think it was Pippi Longstocking or it was Little Orphan Annie. They were going to cast her as a black girl. It's a fictional character, so it doesn't really matter now, does it? Unless it's been explicitly stated, it does. And when you're talking about real people, like if you cast a white Martin Luther King, like if you could cast Sean King as Martin Luther King, that's when you get a problem, in my mind. If it's something that's historical, sort of real-life canon, it's different from Harry Potter. Harry Potter never existed. It doesn't matter if you choose a 7-foot-tall Lithuanian to play him. Anyone can play Harry Potter. You could have a female Harry Potter named Harriet Potter. Who cares? That being said, though, she's skewed the races of her characters deliberately. She's declared that Dumbledore is canonically gay, and I guess had a thing for one of the other professors at one point, and was kind of creepily hitting on Harry at one point, I think. It's kind of weird. And some things like this. She's actually appeased these people over and over by making her characters, by adapting them to the new era, in which if you have a book in which it's 90% straight white people, this is problematic. It's considered hateful and wrong and not inclusionary enough. The problem is that by making those inclusions, she signaled to the lynch mob that she was amenable to them. And so when they came out and said, well, we want there to be transgendered Harry Potter characters, we think that Harry Potter was born female and now has a magical dick. And she says, no, they assume that it's hate. They assume that she just hates transgendered people. Then she comes out and says, well, strong empowered woman thing. Oh, what a bad idea. What a terrible, terrible idea. Now you've pissed the lynch mob off more. Aren't you diverse enough? Don't you know that your characters have to look like a fucking goddamn rainbow bowl of Skittles? Nah, it's very funny how that has happened. Noam Chomsky now having his hand bitten by those he's trying to feed over the last fucking 5 decades or something. It's funny. I love watching this happen. These people are getting their comeuppance. These people have stood for censorship and for this social justice warrior rabble-rousing bullshit tirade thing, and now they're victims of their own monster. It's sort of like a Frankenstein story or something. You created the lynch mob, you whipped them into a frenzy, you used them as a political cudgel, and then you wonder why they eventually turn on you. Well, the problem is that political movements, socio-political movements, mutate. They're like viruses. If I were to release a virus to destroy some enemy, there's no telling what mutants it might spawn. Maybe I've vaccinated my population, but maybe a mutant arises that gets past that vaccine, and all of a sudden 90% of my population's dead too, and it's a mutually assured destruction sort of scenario. The leftists have capitalized upon cancel culture, which could be just called lynch mob culture, or the witch hunts 2.0, and the irony is especially palpable with someone who 20 years ago was mainly sparring with right-wing evangelicals, literally a witch hunt in that case. They're literally complaining about witchery and devil worship and stuff. Now the witch hunters are the same core fans that she once catered to and that defended her. They have completely turned on her, and it's delicious to fucking see. That's about all. Peace out.